All right, we're all here. It's 4:31, and we'll start with public comment. Is there any public comment today? Nobody? Okay. So we're reviewing policy GBN, ICA, and IHBF.
GBN, Family Medical Leave Act. So let's just do that. Excuse me. No,
Good notes.
I had a there. So I didn't make copies of this. I'm just going to read it out loud. Maine School Management did a policy developmental news in its issue of September 2022. And it's in the two most recent sessions, the Maine legislature has added new twists to the Maine Family Medical Care Act, FMLA. In 2021, the act was amended to include new categories of family members, grandchildren, domestic partners' grandchildren. In 2022, the legislature enacted LD 912, quote, an act to extend family medical leave to hourly and school employees, end quote, which took effect on August 8th, 2022. This legislation extends the eligibility for federal FMLA benefits to school employees who have worked at least 900 hours in the previous 12 months. In an effort to simplify FMLA from a policy perspective and to explain the basics of eligibility for the federal and Maine versions of the FMLA, Maine School Management, or MSMA, is providing a significant update to sample policy GBN. So that's the policy that you have in front of you, that sample policy. For boards that have the old sample policy and the two extensive procedures that go with this one, which is GBN R1 and GBN R2, which you also have in your packets. For boards that have the sample policy with this one new policy is intended to replace all three previous documents, and they credit Drummond and Woodson with developing that sample policy. So I do not have a lot to say, obviously, just to look through this, but family medical leave it's a bear. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot to know. It's used frequently in our district for a variety of reasons, and the qualifications, as they said in that press release, and that's here if you want to read that, it's right out of their September issue. They're constantly changing, or we were talking a few days ago, Jody and I, about intermittent family leave, and so just to basically amend our policy to the samples that Maine School Management has asked us to, because I can't sit here and necessarily answer all your questions about family medical leave, because it's complex to say the least. And oftentimes when we have somebody who asks about family medical leave, we go to our books, we go to the law, we go to Maine School Management, we go to the attorneys, and we say, okay, do they qualify? Are they not qualified? They're saying this for medical, they're saying that. Go to doctors, get our notes, right? So it's a very complex process. So what they have here, I think what they're highlighting, obviously at the beginning, is the updated, which I read earlier, the updated laws that people who work at least 900 hours in the previous 12 months. And so for almost all of our employees, they're going to fall under these new benefits after they've worked for us a year, hourly employees.
Because the old one was 1,250
yes.
hours in the previous 12 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
So typically, educational technicians would not qualify for Medical Leave Act, and now at 900 hours they do. And they call it the Maine Mini. That's kind of like the nickname going around right now is the Maine Mini Family Medical Leave Act. So it certainly brings in a whole swath of employees that we've never had to, not to say be concerned about, but just in this respect, we've had to be consider, yeah.
As part of it, right.
I think it's a policy that Maine School Management is going to be continually working on, because it's not possible to foresee all the situations that might come forward needing to use this policy. So I think that it's one that, as situations come and questions are asked about do these folks qualify? How does it need to be handled? It's something that Maine School Management will be on top of to let us know.
Yeah, they have to. They're
Yeah.
just and I think whenever you have legislative changes, you're going to see quick action by Maine School Management to try to get policy samples up to date, so that, because we have to follow the law, even if our policy is lagging behind, we're already having people who are eligible and following this, even though our policy might not reflect it yet, because we follow the law, obviously.
Right,
first
and the
foremost.
union is very much involved.
The collective bargaining units
Yeah.
are very aware of what those laws are, and so employees are entitled to family and medical leave under the Family Medical Leave Act of '93. The Maine Family Medical Leave law, when they meet all eligibility requirements of this law, this policy sets forth several rules that must be applied uniformly to all employees who may be eligible, right? And that's the thing too, is it doesn't necessarily mean people are eligible, but we have to, anytime somebody comes, again, I just use injury, that seems to be the most common one, or pregnancy, right? Those two, when those two elements come up from a medical condition, then obviously somebody's probably going to qualify for family medical leave, and we start the paperwork right away and let them know what they might be eligible for. And that doesn't mean they have to take it either. We just are providing them awareness of what their eligibility is under Family Medical Leave Act. This policy sets forth the rules that must be applied. As used in this policy, family and medical leave means leave available under both state and federal law. And there are different leaves too. There's federal family leave, and there's Maine, like I was referencing earlier, that Maine mini now that's in place as well.
Yeah, and the intermittent.
Right. So you have the federal employee eligibility periods, and so that obviously is what we were most used to. 12 months, worked at least 1,250 hours in the previous 12 months to be eligible for family medical leave. And there are two types of eligibility periods. There's a 12-month period, and it's for birth, adoption, foster care, serious health condition, or qualifying exigency, And then there's the 12-month eligibility period of 12 weeks of Family Medical Leave Act taken following, and it lists what those reasons are. And again, that's what we're pretty used to, those things. It's pretty common, whether it's pregnancy, new child, obviously, adoption. That's a good one. 5, qualifying leave for armed forces, right? That's certainly something that does occur, especially years past when the war on terror was more, I won't say more prevalent, but in actually something that we had the privilege of with employees who served in both. And then I think the note there, this language is one option for the measurement period. The one actually used by the district should be inserted here. So this is where where's our policy here? Our GBN.
1 and 2.
Yep. We would have certainly
Right, the
our.
2 was the one that.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
So which one references the 900 hours as opposed to the 12?
2A in the new one. If you look at
2A?
Yep.
2A in the sample
Okay.
Yep.
includes the 900.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Under the
I
main.
see it.
Yeah, under
Yep.
the main requirements.
Okay.
So we have the Hermon School Department shall comply. So under our old policy, under GBN, we obviously had Hermon School Department shall comply with all applicable provisions of the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993, FMLA, the Maine Family Medical Leave Law, and any other school committee policies and collective bargaining agreements regarding the Family and Medical Leave Act. The superintendent is responsible for implementing administrative procedures to comply with this policy. And then we have our old GBNR1, which has the same eligibility requirements. But we have some things in there, right? Like, for example, under eligibility, to be eligible under FMLA, employees must work at a site where 50 or more employees of the same school committee are employed within 75 miles of a work site. An employee must have been employed. So some of this language no longer applies to Family Medical Leave Act, like the 50 or more employees.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things in here, for example, that just rather than going through all of this, we're just gonna adopt.
Because it's up to date.
Well, it's cleaner wording.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more exact wording.
Right. So for us, what we'll do is for the school committee meeting, we'll put in some of our language in regards to like our fiscal year, our hiring and firing, right? All employees are hiring, termination, contract starts, contract ends. For example, we're a July 1st to June 30th for some of our collective bargaining units, and we're also a September 1 to August 30th. So it's not, we have to make sure that some of those languages are clear here because they do vary depending on what collective bargaining unit that you're talking about. And some collective bargaining agreements, when somebody comes in, they're given credit for certain types of past experience versus others. There's obviously, it's not chain of command, what's it called when you have seniority? There's seniority lists in different departments, and certain people have dual seniority lists. You know, they're here under the health department, but they're here under the science department. So we're just working on cleaning this up to make sure that we put in the appropriate language as it relates to our collective bargaining contracts. And we have the 3 contracts with the 3 different units or 3 different agreements.
But it still states previous 12 months. But the amount of family medical available to employees under the main law is 10 work weeks in any 2-year period. Okay.
Yeah. And so in that note, what's interesting is that if an employer changes the 12-month measurement period used, employees must be given at least 60 days. So that just happened to us. In our most recent collective bargaining agreement, we switched the dates, the start and end dates of the contract they were a July 1 to June 30th contract, and we moved it to September 1, August 30th. So that could potentially impact somebody when you're talking about 12 months in respect to working for us for 12 months. So that's, thankfully, I think we're pretty well aligned now. But those are just those little things that we would have to make sure we give somebody 60 days notice of that change so that they're aware of that. And that's something that we did when we settled the last contract, was give that unit awareness of those date changes, because those things are obviously
to align
important.
this with the collective bargaining
Yep.
terminology.
Yep. You have a separate federal 12-month period for military caregiver leave, so they have that listed, and then it transitions to the main requirements. And let's see here, and that is our GBNR2, then a separate policy. And not surprised it's a little out of date. It was it was adopted and then not changed since '04. So there's some things under our old policy that would not apply anymore, or certainly would need to be added to. And so that's what main requirement does. Leave amount and eligibility. So you have that new language. Employees who have been employed for at least 12 consecutive months are eligible for leave under Maine Family Medical. Beginning August 8, 2022, school employees who have worked at least 900 hours in the previous 12 months are also eligible for federal FMLA benefits under the same conditions as other employees eligible to receive such benefits. So technically, bright people can qualify for both.
Both of them.
Right. The amount of family and medical leave time available to employees under the main law is 10 work weeks in any 2-year period. And so that's obviously something that we don't have, I don't think we have in our old policy, which, not that we weren't following it, but it's just what in our old policy.
Yeah, I think it was just stated a little differently, but it was less than 10 weeks of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Qualifying purposes, same thing. You have all the things that would allow somebody to qualify for medical leave.
Yeah, it just said 24-month period instead of 2 weeks, 2 years.
Right.
It's just the term, they just phrased it differently.
Things were stated differently back in 2004.
And the additional definitions of people who are related to you and how.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they've added to that. Yep. They continue on for qualifying purposes onto page 3. You have 4, 5, and 6 there. You have placement of a child, obviously usually through adoption. You have donation of organ, and you have death or serious health condition of an employee's spouse, domestic partner, parent, sibling, or child as a member of the state military forces, United States Armed Forces, including Guard and Reserve, while on active duty. You then have the notice by the employee. So the employees, obviously, they have to provide a 30-day notice of the employer whenever they're seeking that. They have to provide appropriate, and a lot of times we'll help direct people to what that appropriate medical certification is, because sometimes they've just been told by the union rep, hey, you probably will qualify for Maine or federal leave, and go to the central office, and Jody kicks that ball rolling and gets them headed down the right track, or at least seeing if they qualify. When the employer has reason to believe that an employee is or will be absent for an FMLA qualifying purpose, the employer should request the appropriate information from the employee. And so that's something, again, that those are those things that we have to be well versed in, because you can't ask for the wrong thing either, right? Because people's health and privacy is also important. So just being trained, and Jody's our trained FMLA questioner, form finder, directing them to the right place, and she does a great job with that. Coordination with other leave, and then you have the coordination of the different types of leave that go with the contract, the collective bargaining agreement, different types of leave that can obviously, whether it's Maine or federal, that can be taken concurrently, and that's obviously provided the employee meets all the eligibility requirements. Types of leave that shall run concurrently with FMLA include, but are not necessarily limited to, accrued sick leave, vacation, compensatory time, unpaid leave, disability leave, absence for work-related injuries, and any other applicable types of leave. And I always use having a child as an example, because people are allowed to use their sick time, but then obviously they're allowed to continue in that time of family medical leave, even though they might not have sick time.
Right.
They can continue taking time at no penalty outside of their salary at that point, that they're allowed that time. That's probably the most common one. So the note there, the types of leave specified should be revised to reflect types of leave in the district that the district actually has. So this would be where we would, I don't know how much we would insert from exact verbatim language from the contracts, or if we would just cite things like we have sick time, we have workman's comp time. Like if we just put the general types of time that our collective bargaining units have versus the actual language from those contracts, because they're pages upon pages of language. So I think it's just a list. I'm still seeking clarification on this note right here, but that's something that I will bring to the school committee when I have it. But I think it's just listing the types of leave that we do actually have for our employees per their contracts, not the actual wording from the contracts.
And you can
Right.
But the types of leave that they might be applying for.
And could be eligible for.
Could be eligible for.
Yeah.
Okay.
that work in conjunction with FMLA.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of that's just going to be sick time, maybe for the most part.
Definitely.
Before returning to work, and this is important too, employees taking FMLA for their own serious health condition have to submit a certificate from a healthcare provider, a ready to work form, and so that's pretty standard for us. So that's the Family Medical Leave Act sample policy that they obviously strongly recommend that we adopt and replace our GBN, GBN R1, GBN R2.
Well, it puts it all in one place.
That's nice. Yep. Yep. Any questions about that one?
No, I think that works.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Medical leave. So that would be good to get that one checked off. We were a little behind on that one. All right. Also have suggested language for the school calendar policy. Our current policy that was adopted in, excuse me, well, it says reviewed, so I think those dates are wrong.
Flip-flopped,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it should say adopted in 73, reviewed in 07,
But
and
never amended.
never amended.
Never.
So you, right now, currently, you have no later than its regular March meeting, the Hermon School Committee shall adopt the school calendar for the ensuing school year. Superintendent of schools shall submit a proposed calendar to the school committee in advance of the meeting. And so you just have your time frame. The Maine School Management recommends that we have the following policy. The law requires that schools be in session for at least 180 days annually, of which not fewer than 175 shall be instructional days, i.e. student days, and no more than 5 may be used for in-service education of teachers, administrative meetings, parent-teacher conferences, record days, and similar activities. The board will adopt a school calendar on an annual basis that contains a minimum of 175 days and 180 days for professional staff. Additional days may be approved in accordance with applicable collective bargaining agreements. The superintendent shall prepare and present the proposed school calendar for board approval in the spring of each year. The calendar will indicate the days schools shall be in session, holiday and vacation periods, professional development days, teacher orientation days, parent-teacher conference days, and days when reports to parents will occur.
Meaning end of quarter or semester.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, quarter dates and semester dates,
Which we
typically.
do.
Yep. So right now I have a sample. I'm not going to hand this out because I don't want anybody to see it, but I have our sample calendar. People
next
start
year.
booking their flights to Florida in
next
June.
year.
And what we do is we draft this right around Christmas break, and we draft a couple resolutions or a couple of drafts with different start dates. Sometimes we'll have 2 in service at the start of school, we'll add 1 at the end, we'll look at Christmas vacation, and we'll try to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense. The key with our calendar is that it has to go to UTC, United Technology Center, as you both know. And so we can't be out of step with their school calendar more than 5 days. So if they started 5 days before we did, we'd already be out of step 5. And then if we had a Thanksgiving break, they had 2 days, we had no student days, then we're at 7, and the state would penalize us for that. So what we do is next Monday, the 9th, I think it's the 9th, maybe the 10th, we are meeting, the superintendents are meeting at UTC, and we are all bringing our draft calendars, the multiple drafts that we have, because we try to be on the same page as far as when do you start school, and I know there's a lot of times it's like, well, they get out 2 days before, and we do take that stuff to heart, like we look at those types of things, but the big driving force in making sure that our calendar is aligned is UTC, because we can't be out of step more than 5 days with their school calendar.
Well, and we send a lot of students.
We send a lot of students.
Not just Hermon.
Yes, we do.
But the reason all the superintendents participate in that is because a lot of schools offer that opportunity for students
Yeah.
to attend UTC. So if the calendar doesn't work, then
Yep.
the students aren't able to participate. So I think that's a good thing.
Yep, and we find that UTC, it does a tremendous service to our students. And they have just been absolutely wonderful to work with. We support the trades and the skills and the allied health fields that those students are in. So we want to make sure that it's not just not being out of line 5 days, it's making sure that we're in session so that our kids have transportation to UTC who are not missing their skills and programming that are taking place. So right now, we are out of step on both drafts. We're out of step 1 day. So I feel really good about our 2 drafts. I'm going to bring them both over to UTC on Monday. I'm going to see what the other districts are doing, obviously. Talk to Mr. Turner in 87, because also we like to have as close to a calendar as possible. Yep, we want to make sure that we're very close with 87. Transportation, obviously, you folks have buses that come here, and that's important to us. So, but all that being said, I really like the sample policy. I like the fact that it says the amount of days that we have to have for students. I think that's important to have in there. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that they got rid of the March timeframe because frankly, that's just like the deadline. I plan on having draft 1 in the February meeting.
Right.
Because we'll be ready to look at draft 1, and then we'll obviously come back in March for draft 2. But if we ever got out of step, I like the fact that we could go to an April meeting to approve the calendar if things just like,
Something came up, yeah.
our community wants us to start after Labor Day. Okay, that puts us 3 days off, and we can have those types of conversations. So, there's a lot that goes into the calendar. Currently, I don't have any concerns, and I like that it's stated, the calendar indicates days in session, holiday, vacation, professional development, parent-teacher conference, and right now, we don't have reports in, like, on paper, they're here, they're just not, the principals haven't looked at the dates when time end, but they are present Q1, Q2, Q3, they're ready to be inputted. And I will tell you, right now, one draft has us done June 7th. So,
That's crazy.
yeah, that would be.
I thought graduation June 3rd this year was.
Yeah. So I think that.
No snow days.
Yeah, well, so far, we're doing pretty good.
No snow days.
I'm assuming that like Spruce is part of this too, with regional programs and busing and stuff.
Yep. So all the superintendents and the directors will be there next week to talk about the calendars and try to get everybody close to the same schedule. So.
So yeah, we'll just change the word board to committee on
Yep.
that.
Yep. And remember, I think it's important with this, no more than 5 may be used for in-service. That's with the 180 days annually.
Right.
To drop you below the 175. We have 8 in-service days, but we have 183 days in our contract.
Right.
So we still stay at the 175. So that's like that ceiling, that floor that you can't go below. So that's just the CBA would obviously, allows us the 183 days to have the 8 in-service days with the 175 student days.
Yeah, ours is 185 for our district, like for regular school year, so it could be, some vary from 183
Oh, yeah.
to 185.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, right. They don't have to be,
Right.
the same. It's just, I don't know of any districts that do 180. I haven't searched that much, but
Probably
most I
not.
feel like are that 183 to 185. So,
You wouldn't want to cut it that close, I don't think.
no. And it really, the in-service allows, frankly, it allows you to extend, one of the holiday weekends in Columbus Day, and, it gives you some flexibility. It gets you a day in March, it gets the students a day in March. So we do like keeping the in-service days in there too, because it helps break up some of the long months like March and October. So. So right now, I really like this policy. I think it's pretty well written, and frankly, it hits everything that we do. The only thing that we don't highlight is that they say teacher orientation. We do teacher orientation at every building does its own orientation
New staff.
for new staff. So that would be the only thing that I would say we would not put on the calendar. Because the principals schedule that as they hire teachers throughout the summer, as people are being brought on board. So I would say the only part there that I think we should get rid of is the teacher orientation. You just couldn't put that in a district-wide calendar as far as, I'm sure some districts call their opening days teacher orientation, like August 28th.
I think we're separate too, though.
But ours are separate.
Yeah, ours
And,
are separate too.
We don't do orientation at the beginning of the year, where those are in-service PD days.
Right.
So the orientation's done at the building level in
Yeah.
July or early August. So for us, PD covers what our calendar has.
Right.
Sounds good.
Good on that one?
So,
So there's no sample policy for homebound instruction, IHBF. So I talked to a couple of different people. Obviously, we are adopted in 67, we're amended in 73. So I talked to Maine School Management. They don't have this policy, and they don't have a sample policy. I talked to our special ed director and asked her where this would be applicable. And this is where I think this policy generated from, but then special ed steps in and does its own thing. So basically what I'm trying to say is, I'm gonna recommend that this policy be rescinded,
Okay.
and here's why. So right now, we have teaching service shall be provided insofar as possible either by home/school, not homeschool, home/school telephone connection, or by teacher visits of 1 hour a day to any student who is expected to be confined to hospital or home for a period of 3 weeks or more. This service shall be extended to students who have been enrolled in public schools for a period of at least 3 weeks, except that the superintendent may use his or her discretion in providing such service at the beginning of the year or for students newly arrived in the community. So I talked to a special ed about this because that's the group that I felt like this would be more applicable to. If we had a student who was rendered unable to come to school for a medical reason or was confined to home, we would then undergo the 504 process.
Right.
And we would provide tutoring services to meet that student's need based upon all the things that would come into play under a 504. Why do they have a 504, right? What's the disability? How long are they expected to need the 504? What accommodations are necessary? And then how can we best service them in their current situation? And one of the things that we were talking about this morning in respect to, we would never send anybody to the hospital to tutor a student. That if a student needs to be in the hospital, they're there to heal. We would never put that type of weight on them from an academic standpoint. Our expectation for them and the family would be get better, and then we'll work with you when you're able to come home. In the process, though, we can set up a 504 plan where we say, you know, do you want to do this at home? Do you want to wire in and watch a class, right? There would be things like that. But and certainly in today's environment, you can't even send people into hospitals, right? We would not even have that ability to begin with. At least I know that most hospitals, I believe it's still 2-person visitation.
I think a lot of them still are.
I think that's,
And then if a student's at Acadia, they have an entire school within the hospital.
And that's another area where you start talking about the mental health of young
Right.
people, and we're not going to pile school on top of things that treatment plans that they happen to be there for. So we believe that this was in 1973 when it was last amended. This was designed with a noble intention, but 504 hadn't been around to the degree that it is today.
Correct.
So 504 for us, and that's not uncommon, right? Kid gets mono, right? 3-4 weeks out of school. Kid has a very nasty break of a bone. They might be out a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right, surgery. We go to Acadia, we go to 504 plan, we refer that student for a 504, and we handle that instruction in that respect. This, I would just, this to me lacks, it gives you no liability protection. It's the expectation that you're going to send teachers to a home or to a hospital. We certainly do not have the power in our collective bargaining to do that. It also doesn't talk about any type of how someone might qualify. So I think it was noble in its intent. It probably served its purpose back in the 70s and maybe beyond that, but now we have 504 in place that protects students. Or an IEP.
Who's homebound, but you would come up with a different plan.
And that's the opportunity, those things, that's the opportunity to provide the best education possible for the student, depending on what the needs are. And
Yes.
Yeah, it's individualized. You can't.
So there's already a process in place to assess that and help, so.
And we have students that they're in transition mode from going from us to a regional program or going to Acadia for the day treatment program. And while they're on the waiting list, we provide them tutoring at the central office, at their building in a private conference, right? Like we provide those services, but that goes through the holding hands, 504, right? The 504 does that. That's what the 504 plan or the IEP plan is designed to do. It's not the superintendent looks at it case by case and sends somebody there to do an hour of tutoring like that. That's just not the world that we're in so far, or in anymore. So I'm going to recommend that we rescind this policy, and if obviously we get to that meeting and people want to know why, we can talk about the 504 plan and why why it's a good thing now.
I think that's a good idea.
we moved good.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't have a second.
that's close. And my watch might be off a minute. So I don't have, what I wanted to make the subcommittee aware of is Mrs. Bates, who's one of the attorneys from Maine School Management, yeah, MSMA, or is it MSSA? MSMA, right, MSMA. She reached out to me last month. So just prior, or right at the beginning of COVID, Hermon had paid to have all their policies reviewed and anything brought forward, for example, like this one, 1973, had already had that request to be done, and then through COVID, some things happened, I guess, and
Oh, yeah, I remember that, Deb, when we
Yes.
told Jim, we gave him the go-ahead that we would
Right.
put that in the budget.
well,
Yep.
and that's who she referenced, was Mr. Chassie.
Yeah.
So she asked me if I wanted to have them continue in that, and I said yes. And
Well,
so
we already paid for it, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look into that. But I think it would be great for them to be able to tell us, for example, the FMLA, you're out of date on this.
Right.
Here's the amended policy versus us going through and going, oh, that was 04, that's probably good. Oh, that's 73, that's no good. But then some stand the test of time and they're in really good shape and there's not a lot of language difference.
Right, but we would have already known about GBN just coming up in August.
It would
You know,
have already been
something.
flagged as of
Right,
this
right.
summer.
Yeah.
Right. So when she gets me that list back, then I'd like to reach back out to you, schedule our next meeting, and go through the ones that we need to adopt that are clearly behind and are, here's the sample, you need to get this in place because it's law or legislative change, or,
Yep.
geez, don't do that anymore, that's from 73, that is no good anymore.
Right.
So-
Yeah, so we don't waste our time on those
Right.
things, yeah.
And they would be able to bring forth the ones that are more relevant, like the GBN meeting to be attended to now. They would be able to bring those forward.
Well, in my practice is anytime when we go through and look at policies and, oh my word, 1973.
Right.
That ought to be looked at.
Yeah.
And then I send away to her and I say, hey, do you have a sample for this? And she sends me the sample. Or Jody makes a note of one and says, hey, you need to look at this policy because it's out of date based upon a training I just went to. And
Right.
so
She's
that's
in
how we
charge.
got onto the FMLA one, was because of Jody and her training.
Right.
And so we knew that, and then we sent away for that policy. So
Okay.
I was all for it. I said, yes, I'll check and see if it's already been paid for or if we have to budget
Okay.
it for.
I'm pretty sure I remember.
I think it was too.
Yeah.
So they have an IOU for us, so
Yeah.
that would be great. So, so I'll let you know.
Yep.
And I'll give you the order of how they recommend that we handle them. I think it would just be a lot better than picking stuff that looks old and out of date. So-
Because some of it might not be relevant
Might not be.
according to what they have for policies.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
yep. So, okay.
Yeah, sounds
Sounds
Great.
good.
Thank you.
Okay.